The evening was one of those rare moments in the city when the temperature was perfect and the atmosphere felt like it had been crafted just for this occasion. The sky was darkening, the stars were starting to twinkle, and the scent of gourmet dishes wafted through the crisp air. Inside, the restaurant was bustling with energy. It was a place where exclusivity was the rule, and the ambiance was something you could only experience if you were someone who mattered. The polished mahogany floors reflected the dim golden lights, and waiters moved like synchronized dancers among the tables, delivering the finest dishes to a crowd of affluent guests. Jake, a young and ambitious waiter, felt at home in the elegant chaos. He had worked at the restaurant for almost a year and had quickly climbed from busboy to full waiter. His uniform was always crisp, his manner always polished, and he took pride in his ability to read guests, making them feel as if they were the most important people in the room. Jake had a certain swagger about him, a sense of superiority, especially when he interacted with patrons he considered real guests, the rich, the successful, the elite. That evening, he was at his post near the door, ready to greet incoming guests. A young couple entered first, dressed in the finest attire, their heads held high. Jake greeted them with a smile, leading them to their table. Then, as the door chimed again, he saw a man walking in who stood out from the crowd, an unassuming figure who wore a black t-shirt, jeans, and a simple jacket. The man's presence seemed to melt into the background, his manner so humble that he appeared to be lost among the glitz and glamour of the upscale crowd. Jake's first instinct was to dismiss him. Just another guy who didn't know where he was, trying to blend in with the rich and famous. He had seen his share of posers, people who tried too hard to be a part of the high society but clearly didn't belong. This man fit that profile perfectly. Jake watched as the man walked past him, paying him no mind. The man didn't make eye contact or seem to notice Jake's scrutiny. His calmness only reinforced Jake's assumption that he wasn't anyone important. The man took a seat at one of the quieter tables in the corner. He settled down with a relaxed air, his face expressionless, as if he wasn't trying to impress anyone. Sophia, the restaurant's manager, was nearby, supervising the evening's flow. She watched him for a moment, but like the rest of the staff, she didn't think much of it. She was busy dealing with other matters. However, she had learned over the years to trust her instincts, and something about this man felt familiar, but she couldn't put her finger on it just yet. Jake, still not fully noticing the man in the corner, was focused on the more high-profile customers who had just entered the restaurant. He was serving drinks to a table of celebrities when he finally made his way over to the corner where the casual diner was seated. Politeness, but there was a hint of condescension in his voice. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" The man looked up, his face calm and friendly. "I'll have the salmon, please," he said in a soft voice, "and just a glass of water." Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. Salmon? No appetizers, no fancy wine. He couldn't help but let out a small, barely audible sigh. He looked the man over again, judging him based on his appearance. "Just water?" Jake asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Seems like you are not here for the full experience." The man's smile never wavered. "The salmon will be fine, thank you," he replied, clearly unfazed by Jake's tone. Jake stood there for a second, still irritated by the man's simplicity. He made a mental note to himself. This guy obviously doesn't know how to appreciate the finer things in life. Still, he went to place the order, mentally rolling his eyes. Sophia, who had been observing the exchange from a distance, raised an eyebrow. She didn't say anything immediately, but made a mental note of Jake's behavior. Something about the situation bothered her, but she wasn't sure why. She had seen many celebrities over the years, but the man in the corner, there was something about him that seemed almost unassuming, despite his presence. As Jake went about his evening, delivering drinks and serving appetizers, he didn't notice the buzz that was slowly growing around the restaurant. The man in the corner was drawing attention from the other diners. One by one, a few people began to recognize him. "I think that's Keanu Reeves," whispered a woman to her husband, her voice filled with disbelief. Her husband squinted, trying to get a better look. No way. It couldn't be. Well, he looks different than I remember. The woman leaned forward, eyes widening. It is him. It's definitely him. That's the actor from The Matrix, I remember his face. But why is he sitting all alone in that corner dressed like that? The husband nodded, still in shock. He's always been so low-key. I remember reading about how he funded that children's charity. He's one of the good ones. As the whispers spread from table to table, more diners began to recognize Keanu. Their voices were hushed at first, but as the realization spread, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The buzz became louder, but Keanu, unaware of the growing excitement around him, remained completely composed. He didn't seek attention. He didn't want to draw any more attention to himself than was necessary. Jake, completely oblivious to the shift in the room, continued to serve his tables, moving past Keanu's without a second glance. He was still caught up in his own thoughts that were full of assumptions about the man's appearance and behavior. A few moments later, a distinguished-looking man, clearly one of the wealthiest patrons in the restaurant, stood up from his table. His face lit up with a wide grin, and he made his way over to Keanu's table. "Mr. Reeves!" the man exclaimed, approaching Keanu with obvious excitement. "I can't believe it's really you. I just wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done. My daughter received treatment at that hospital you helped fund. Your generosity is unmatched." Keanu looked up, his face lighting up with a warm, genuine smile. "I'm glad I could help," he said in his usual calm voice. "It's a pleasure to meet you." The man continued, shaking Keanu's hand enthusiastically. "I've been following your work for years, not just your movies, but your philanthropy. You've made a real impact in this world." As the man continued to gush, the room suddenly felt smaller. The energy shifted. People at nearby tables started looking over at the scene, realizing that they were witnessing something special. Jake, still carrying a tray of drinks, passed by just as the man thanked Keanu again for his contributions to the charity. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Oh no, that's Keanu Reeves," Jake thought, feeling his heart race. "I just insulted Keanu Reeves." Jake's stomach dropped as he continued walking past the table, the weight of his earlier rudeness settling in. His mind raced. How could I have been so dumb? He cursed himself under his breath. He had judged the man based on his appearance, assuming that because he was dressed casually, he didn't belong in the upscale restaurant. Sophia, seeing Jake's panicked expression, walked over to him. She had seen everything. She knew exactly what had happened. "Jake," she said softly, pulling him aside. "I saw what happened. We'll talk about it later." Jake couldn't hide the guilt that was clearly written across his face. He knew he had messed up in a big way. His mind kept replaying his earlier thoughts and actions, and he realized that he had treated Keanu just like everyone else who didn't fit the mold of the typical wealthy, high-profile customer. Sophia gave him a stern look, but she didn't scold him. "Just learn from it, okay?" Jake nodded, feeling humiliated. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had just done. This wasn't just any mistake, it was a mistake he would remember for the rest of his life. As the night drew to a close, Keanu finished his meal, stood up, and made his way to the exit. Before leaving, he stopped at the table where he had dined, taking a moment to leave something behind. He placed a thick stack of bills on the table, more than enough to cover his meal and leave an extraordinary tip. Alongside the money, he placed a small handwritten note. Sophia, who was nearby, picked up the note and read it aloud to the staff gathered around. The message was simple but powerful. Keanu hadn't chosen to make a spectacle of his generosity. He hadn't reacted with anger toward the waiter who had disrespected him. Instead, he left behind a quiet lesson, one that would reverberate through the restaurant long after he left. Jake, still standing in the back, watched as Sophia held up the note. He felt the weight of the message sink in. Kindness is free. In that moment, he realized that Keanu had taught him a lesson far greater than any words of reprimand ever could. As the restaurant began to quiet down, Jake sat in the staff room, his head in his hands. The sting of his mistake was still fresh, but he knew that this was a moment he wouldn't forget. Sophia walked in, her voice gentle. "Are you okay, Jake?" Jake looked up at her, nodding. "Yeah, I'm fine. I really messed up." Sophia smiled faintly. "We all make mistakes. The key is what you do after them." Jake took a deep breath. He knew that he had learned something tonight, something that had nothing to do with the job itself, but everything to do with how he treated people. Keanu had left an indelible mark on him, one that wasn't just about his fame but about his humility and generosity. As he sat there, Jake silently promised himself that from now on, he would never judge someone by their appearance. He would be kinder, more respectful, and more aware of the impact his words and actions could have on others.